talking about online recommendations, holiday season coming up, that kind of
Mhm,
leads me nicely to the fashion brand Miu Miu came out with this very interesting, interactive, very like tactile focused web experience. And it's got folders as you scroll. Like there are a lot of interactive elements, and I like this for a couple of reasons. Number one, because it's running in the opposite direction of like the AI slop of it all, right? Like it's very old school looking. It's just such a turning away from the quick, easy, flashy design that is AI right now. And that's not to say that that is bad or that people shouldn't be doing that, but for a luxury brand that's focused on quality and being handmade and being higher dollar and being more just touch like one-to-one experience, that having the design reflect that I think makes a lot of sense. I'm sure it wasn't cheap to have an experience like this drummed up, and it's not for every brand to do because it does take a lot of resources to create something like this. But I just thought that was a really strategic and thoughtful choice in a moment of cheap, fast production, really flashy graphics. It just felt almost lo-fi. It felt scrapbooky almost, and I found it very refreshing. And I'm very into brands. There's a lot of conversation right now about like art or commerce, how art, which I'm very, very into from brands right now because I'm not seeing a lot of that. So I wondered what your thoughts are on a choice like that.
yeah, I mean, this hits on what we've been talking about these last couple weeks with, Apple designing their, logo using glass and, like, light to
Mhm.
create the actual rainbow effect, in the
Mhm.
logo that we see for Apple TV. Um, the choice for Barber to partner with Wallace& and Gromit, that
Mhm.
created the, stop action, like, claymation, um, ad that took 2 years for them to create. So this whole idea of, like, craft and art versus, like, AI, because we recently talked about Coca-Cola saying that they're using AI to create their Christmas ad again, and then Disney saying that they're going to allow users to create AI slop basically for their
Mhm.
platform. So I think it's like definitely something that's happening right now where companies are kind of putting a stake in the ground, and I think it makes sense for Miu Miu to go on the side of craft, right? Because that's
Mhm.
what they're trying to portray is that their brand is like luxury, that it's, craft work, that it takes time, that there's
Yeah.
thought behind it. And I think when brands are putting that behind their marketing efforts, it comes across as that for their product itself. It's a similar
Mhm.
thought that I had with like Barber, where now like it makes me think that it's like long lasting, that it's like meant to survive seasons, that it's not fast fashion that you're supposed to throw
Right.
away after like one use, or that it's not like trendy, something that you just, have for like the moment and throw away. It's like, no, this is a coat that you're going to purchase. It costs upwards of like, $500. And I think that more people are starting to look for that. I know I am, like
Yeah.
I don't just want to be buying, fast fashion. I want stuff that is going to last me longer. Especially for like luxury brands, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like, if that's what you're trying to like portray is that craft work, then it makes a lot of sense. And I agree. It took a while for them to put this together. Like websites like this don't just like come about. So many fashion brands these days just kind of seem like, oh, here's our like product catalog and then just go and
Right.
buy, right? Like there's no like fun behind it. One of the other things that this reminds me of is we're gonna have a bonus episode about advent calendars. With like
Oh.
the whole idea of you're creating these like special moments to like ride the tide of like what people are talking about at the moment, right? And like the decision to go for like cheap products, or like, products that like are larger, more long lasting, and that are actually going to feel like it was worth it to buy the advent
Mhm.
calendar, right? And we've seen that the main one that we were talking about was Sephora, because
Ah.
you know they've kind of gone down in quality, right? Like it used to be like you would buy it and it was like well worth it, right? And then versus Amazon, which just launched a really like fancy one with like the fancy Korean skincare that like,
Okay.
you normally wouldn't get, or that like you don't know like which one to purchase, right? So I thought it
Mhm.
was like a new way of like Amazon being like, we're gonna focus on luxury, but then we're also gonna be curators, right? Like we're
Right.
gonna help you find the products that we endorse and that will make it easier for you to trust versus like just, throwing something together the way it seems that Sephora has started doing and not really thinking about like the consumer, but just trying to make the sale. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of brands need to start thinking about that. Like, are you actually creating packages or products or services that make sense for your consumer, or are you just trying to make a sale as quickly as possible and
Mhm.
not care about that churn that happens like later?
Right. Yeah. I think that's so true. Um, it's tricky, you know? I and it takes a lot of forethought too. I think that that's the other big takeaway is that they clearly had been thinking about this and planning for it for many months, instead of scrambling at the last minute to throw this campaign together. So again, thoughtfulness,
Hmm.
artistry, craft, that's the ethos of their whole brand. That's why people buy luxury. So I just thought, oh, this tracks. This makes a lot of sense. But
Yeah.
yeah.
One thing that we were talking about last week with Mark Stenberg at Adweek was the whole idea that like AI is like the future. I mean, both of us kind of work with AI
Mhm.
tools. We like, help create content. We help do our jobs with AI. So we're not at least I'm not anti AI. That's
No,
not
no, no.
why we're having these conversations. It was more about like this idea that Mark said, it's like, should you be the first to be the
Mhm.
one doing it, or should you kind of like wait it out and be like the third and then kind of incorporate it in a way that like makes sense, right? And I think that
Yeah.
was what my initial like, dislike of like the Disney AI announcement was that like, does it make sense for their brand when like they're also a huge brand that like goes after, people for using their IP, they're
Mhm.
like they've got lawyers on like speed dial to get stuff taken
Mhm.
down. But here they are saying like, oh, well, yeah, we're going to allow users to like use AI on our platform. I'm like, it doesn't like make sense. When on the other side, they're very, like, anti people using, their IP. So that's where I'm just like, brands need to start thinking about, like, what works for them or, like, what makes
Yeah.
sense. We talked previously about like remember when Duolingo announced that they're like, we're AI first, And at the time, I remember us like talking about how, like, what does that mean? If you are doing it for like cost savings, are you then passing that on to like your
Mm.
user? Right. And I feel with like luxury brands, are you gonna pass that on to the user, For
Yeah.
Disney, are you gonna be passing on that on to the user? Because all I see is that the ticket prices to, like, Disneyland and Disney World are going up. So, like, where's the consumer and, like, how you're thinking about your consumer coming out, when you're having these, like, discussions? Or is it
Mhm.
not at all? You know?
Right. Yeah, and it's hard to say because 'cause we're not part of those conversations, but
Right.
it is you wonder about what are the choices being made, what's the strategic thinking behind these choices, yeah.
Mhm.